Welcome to the Growth Lab. This is the podcast dedicated to the business of beauty and vitality. Today, we are sitting down with Len May, which is the founder of EndoDNA. It's an amazing practice that features DNA analysis to improve patient care. Pretty cool. Let's find out more. This episode is brought to you by Med Spa Accelerator. We help med spas and weight loss clinics solve the bottleneck of inconsistent, unqualified patient leads to achieve a scalable monthly revenue without staff burnout. We're absolutely thrilled to have Lynn over here join us to discuss the future of aesthetics and these unique programs. Let's get started. Good afternoon, Lynn. How are you?
Hey, Jason. I'm great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited to dive into your story. I like to frame these conversations simply past, present, and future. We're going to start with your origin story, which is how you got into this demanding but rewarding industry. And then I want to pivot over to the present reality of what's working, what's not working. And then I want to look to the future outlook of the next 2 to 3 years and the biggest strategic moves that you're planning for EndoDNA. And that way, we're going to cover a full spectrum of building out a successful clinic. Does that sound like a good roadmap to you?
Let's do it.
Great. So you've been at EndoDNA for about 8 years. What made you want to get into DNA and genetics?
Yeah, I think if I can start with my origin story. So
Please.
I was the kind of kid that would sit in class and kind of daydream. My teacher would call me and my mind would be elsewhere. So I became also disruptive because I was trying to figure out, get some dopamine because I wasn't really being stimulated at that time. So it ended up, my parents took me to see some doctors, and I was diagnosed with ADD, attention deficit disorder. I was missing the hyperactive, so I wasn't ADHD. Now it's all grouped together. And they put me on prescription medication. And that prescription medication sort of numbed me to my sense of self. Now, it maybe helped me to focus a little bit, but there was no ups or downs. There was no happy, no sad. So before school, around ninth grade or so, there's older kids hanging out. They asked me if I want to smoke a cigarette. I was like, yeah, man, I'm going to smoke a cigarette. I'm going to be cool. Like the kids, they never questioned whether they had one cigarette. So they passed around a cigarette. I took a drag of it. Didn't taste like a cigarette to me. I don't smoke cigarettes now, but when I was a kid, I'm experimenting. So took another one and they're laughing. I'm like, what? So they put cannabis inside the cigarette. And when I went back to class, the windows that are open in my head sort of narrowed. I could focus. So I'm not advocating this for anybody, but I'm just telling my story. Cannabis became my go-to medicine. And I stopped taking all prescription medication. My parents weren't that crazy about it. They actually ended up calling the cops on me when I was 17, almost 18, and trying to have me arrested and then kicking me out of the house. So I was homeless for a while, and I was trying to figure out what to do. I finished high school, went to college, went to physical therapy school, opened up a company, never worked as a physical therapist in my life, and got out of that, exited. I was sitting at home. I was actually working in music. I had a job at Tower Records, which for those people that are young people, they used to sell records and CDs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I was a music buyer for them. My ex-wife was like, hey, it's time for you to get a real job. So I'm like, okay. I went to work for Price Waterhouse at the time and then PwC. So then went to work for a venture capital company. Then I decided I want to do a commercial real estate. Did that. And I was the managing director of Keller Williams Commercial. And I'm from Philadelphia, moved me out to California, to Los Angeles. And I was sitting in an office and these guys came in. I wasn't sure I wanted to do real estate because it's not a reciprocal state. And it was 2010. It was just the market was crashing. And these guys came in, they wanted to open up an alternative pharmacy. And nobody knew what they were talking about. So they got to me and I was like, alternative pharmacy, what do you really want? And they wanted to open up a cannabis dispensary. So I'm like, all right, cool. Where's your paperwork? You have to be compliant with this, that. They don't know what I was talking about. So I said, I'll help them, which I did. Got them a space and put the paperwork together and they offered me a partnership. So okay. So I went and we opened up 4 more dispensaries under the same brand. But where this, to answer your question, how I got there, I started seeing 2 people or many people would take the same variety of cannabis and have a complete different experience. And two people can take the same one and have a different experience. And I was really, my ADD kicked in. I was hyper focused trying to find out what the solution is. So I came across a video of this guy that was genetically sequencing the plant. So long story, a little bit longer, I went to consult with them and I learned how to do genetic sequencing of the plant side. And the parent company of this company that I was working with was doing what's called pharmacogenomics, which is a study of how drugs affect individual bodies and how drugs interact with contraindications, how they interact with one another. So I really got into human genomics. And I had a light bulb moment. I said, we have plant genetics here, we have human genetics here. Let's bring those two together and guide people. And they didn't want to do that. So I got lucky. I grabbed some really smart scientists and launched EndoDNA in December of 2017. The idea was, when I met my business partner too, my biggest, aha and kind of mission statement was I wanted to build the world's largest repository on efficacy. What is individualized, what is personalized. And we went about it with first the gap in the industry, which was the endocannabinoid system. And we got a patent on that. We got a patent on the use of DNA to make recommendations associated with the endocannabinoid system. And a few years went by, and we got a call from a doctor, and one of the doctors was saying to me, listen, I specialize in female hormone health, and we have a lot of women that are in their late 20s, early 30s that are coming in with perimenopause symptoms. And we have women that are coming in that have menopause with really adverse effects from their menopause, like hot flash severity, frequency, sleep issues, weight, all these different things. So is there a way that we can get ahead of those as practitioners? And I said yes, because I always say yes to everything that I figured out later. And I met with my bioinformatics team, and we ended up building a female hormone health test. And then we shifted our entire model because we're selling our DNA testing to individuals. We have thousands of users all over the world. But in 2024, we shifted to B2B. So we build these tests: female hormone health, male hormone health, cognitive health, skin, genomics, all these different tests. And then we realized that a lot of doctors don't really understand genomics. So we ended up building our platform including AI or machine learning. And we got a patent on the machine learning-based efficacy predictions based on genetic and biometric information. And the reason why this is important, you can chat with your DNA. You can ask your genome questions. So a practitioner can say, hey, I understand all these likely impactful markers, but show me how Jason metabolizes and show me what his aromatization level is or anything else. So you can ask it questions and it'll answer back in like an 8th grade language. So that's where we build our platform. It's called BIOS on top of EndoDNA. And now we have practitioners that are using our genetic testing, but also our BIOS platform to make better recommendations for their patients. So it's personalized treatment plans that take in your genomic information, baseline blood work, all these different lifestyle habits, anything else, and it gives practitioners a treatment plan suggestion. But the real benefit of this is the feedback loop. So now that the practitioner says, all right, this is your treatment plan, and the patient has their patient portal, now we have a partnership. The practitioner and the patient are in partnership. So, the doctor has hundreds of patients. I'm my only most important patient, and we need to collaborate on this. So that feedback loop of coming back with patient-reported outcome as well as different blood works to see what epigenetically has been triggered, that's a way the AI learns and makes better predictions and better suggestions to the practitioner as well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Wow. Gosh, I don't even know where I can start based on all that information. I guess let's go back to the very beginning. What medication did you start on when you were on ADD medication? Was it Ritalin? Just curious.
I think it was Ritalin. Yeah, I think that's what
Okay, I was on it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the issue with just ADD, and I did a lot of research on people who are extremely successful financially, at least in business, billionaires, etc. And you have 80% of them, or so the studies say, that have some level of neurodivergence. And I think we as a society need to stop grouping people and tell them they have a disorder. Something is wrong with you. You have a disorder because
Yeah.
we use that as a crutch. To me,
Yeah.
my ADD is my superpower. I wouldn't have it
Yeah.
any other way. If I know how to frame it correctly and I know my guardrails, I know how to use it correctly. So one of the benefits is, first of all, we're born with a depletion of dopamine. So our brain is always looking for the next hit of dopamine. And we can get caught by, shiny objects. Oh, there's something there, something there. But if we're able to utilize our ADD as our superpower, we can avoid those things and we can mitigate that. And the thing that makes us unique is the ability to recognize patterns. So patterns that may not look like patterns to some people, we can connect those dots and multitask effectively because now we can group three things that seem unrelated together and we can group them together as a chunk, a task. And that makes it unique, and we can do that naturally if we use it correctly.
That's very interesting because I know for me personally, when I, consume or I have consumed in the past marijuana, it didn't help my ADD or ADHD, not in a good way. I kind of get, it makes it worse. I'd be
Yeah.
drifty, and that may be what do you attribute that to? Maybe just my biomarkers then, right?
So going back to that, so the endocannabinoid system is our own endogenous system. And what we take, and the role of the system is to maintain homeostasis or balance within our other systems. And the way that
Okay.
it does that, it gets signals from the other systems, sends it up the central nervous system like salmon swimming upstream to your brain, and then your brain releases neurochemicals. So the two that are endogenous means we produce them ourselves, or well, the first one's called anandamide. So the word ananda means bliss in Sanskrit. So this is, if we're taking delta-9 THC, it binds to your CB1 receptors, which are located in our brain central nervous system, and secretes anandamide or AA. And that is when we get the runner's high or anything like that, it's endorphins, but it's also endocannabinoids that are being released. And when we
Okay.
consume CBD, it has an affinity for the CB2 receptor, and that releases a neurochemical called 2AG. So when we have deficiencies in our own endogenous endocannabinoids, we consume phytocannabinoids from the plant. The challenge is that having the right amount, so delta-9 THC has a very narrow therapeutic window. So if you get the right amount with the right essential oils, which are called terpenes in the plant,
Yeah.
it supplants what you may be naturally in. The challenge, and maybe that's what happened to you, I don't know, but the challenge is that if you take a little bit too much THC and you have genetic predispositions to certain things like stress reactivity or mood or depressive feelings or impulsivity, it can actually turn those genetic predispositions on epigenetically. So finding the right amount, and that's one of our tests that we do, finding the right amount, finding the right ratio of terpenes, that's your secret sauce.
Well, I'd be interested in taking that test.
Sure.
Absolutely. I mean, is it still available for consumers or is it
The-
only B2B now?
No,
Oh, it
that's the
is.
only test that we sell direct to consumer, which is on EndoDNA.com. It's our
Okay.
endocannabinoid system test, Endocanna Health, and
Yeah.
that one is directly available. That's available directly to consumers.
How much is the test?
So one retails for $199, I believe.
Okay. And
But
then
you can
that
also
it's gonna
use
be
raw
permanent,
data.
right?
What's
It
that?
is what it is. When I get that test result, it doesn't change over time, right? It is what it is. That's my genetic profile.
Yeah, your DNA doesn't change. It's a great question because you. By the way, just one more thing I want to mention about the test. If somebody's already taken a 23andMe which is not in business anymore, but if they have that, or they're taking an Ancestry.com or Family Tree DNA, any other DNA test, you can upload your raw data, and we can interpret that and provide you an endocannabinoid system test as well
Oh,
instead
okay.
of swabbing. So genetics are an interesting thing because it used to be, oh, it's in my genes. There's nothing I can do about it. And I think that science has led us into a wrong, painted us in a corner where it's incorrect. And what I mean by that is when we're born, we get our 50% of our genes from our mother, 50% from our father. When we're born, we have genetic predispositions. There's encoding to code for certain proteins to be expressed. And maybe 20, 30%, depends on the individual, are turned on. So things like skin color, eye color, hair color, all those things. The remainder of our genetic predispositions, that is up to us to turn on or off, and it's based on lifestyle. So what affects that? Well, the food that we put in our bodies. So our
Hmm.
nutrients, they affect the epigenetic expression, which means if I can give people a visual, think of it as a big board of circuit breakers, right? And some of them are on or some of them are off. So what we're doing is we're making sure, having our genome as our life's GPS, we're making sure that we know which things to turn on and turn off. And I'll explain that in a second. So a lifestyle, food, nutrients, vitamins, minerals, all those things, they can turn on epigenetic expression. Also, exposure to heavy metals, pesticides, all these different things, they actually can control our epigenetic expression. And the other
Okay.
thing is our own neurochemistry. And what I mean by that is if we're secreting a lot of cortisol, for instance, that can, through stress, that can
Yeah.
turn on our epigenetic expression. But I always tell people, like, and I know there's two camps, like, some people, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. That's what, whatever intended for me to have. And I think of it this way, and I mentioned GPS. So your genome is your GPS of life. I live in Los Angeles. I'm from Philadelphia. So I can get in my car and I can drive from LA to Philly. Without a GPS unit, what will happen? I'm going to get there eventually, but I'm going to hit some potholes along the way, traffic jams, wrong turns. Now, if I have my GPS, it'll tell me better ways to get there. And this is your genome. Knowing this about yourself empowers you to take specific action with practitioners as well, doctors that are personalized to you. And that's what
Yeah,
makes it
no, that
unique.
I think that's amazing because I mean, I've been kind of flying blind, as it were, without that, just trying to find out what works for me personally. I
Mm,
take other supplements that I believe that I think are good for me that I've been trying for a while. For example, like Blueprint by Brian Johnson, very good. It's got a lot of great stuff in it, NAD, glutathione, all sorts of really good stuff. And I believe it's good for me, but and I can see some results for sure, but I would like to get some more so a baseline, right?
right.
And that would be great to get some biomarkers on that. Fantastic. And so the website, ladies and gentlemen, is endodna.com. And you can go ahead and get this test for $200. The link is going to be in the description down below. And what about, let's talk about the provider part on the other part. So, how
Mm.
is this helping them?
Well, so going back to this whole thing of the provider having hundreds of patients and you're your only patient. So one of the things that I've learned over the years, and I had this experience, my daughter was going back to college, she needed to see a doctor, and they spent like 15 minutes with her. So, kind of going through the motions and doing the same thing. So it's this cookie cutter approach to sick care. And we're all individuals. So we all have our own personalized experience, and doctors and practitioners need to also be informed that everybody's different, which they know. But if we can provide them a path to be able to accelerate and personalize their protocol specifically to the individual without spending too much time, I think that's the big win for the doctor. So the way that it works for practitioners is, we talked about a hormone health test. So they were HIPAA compliant. The kits are white label for the practice. They would swab their patient. It's a buccal swab. Swab means to your cheek. You register that. Once you register, the information is de-identified. It's treated just like a medical record because it's HIPAA and GDPR compliant. They would send that sample to our lab. It takes about 14 days to get your results. They would send their patient to get blood work in the meantime. All that information is taken in by the platform, which is called BIOS. Then BIOS
Okay.
looks at lifestyle, your genetic information, and your blood work baseline, and gives suggestions to a practitioner. So the suggestions are pharmaceutical suggestions. So for hormones, there's hormone optimization. This is how much estradiol, this is how much progesterone is suggested. Then it'll give you supplements. These are the supplements that are also included. So D3, maybe K2, DIM, etc. And then maybe it's lifestyle modifiers. So whatever it is, eat this kind of diet, etc. They save it. It becomes a treatment plan, and it becomes a treatment plan in the patient portal. Now we're aligned. We're holding each other accountable. I have an action plan. So when I come back in 3 months to get my blood work, we can see what changes epigenetically are happening through your blood work, through your biomarkers, and we can actually track biological age changes on that as well. So we can see how efficacious that protocol is, and the platform learns better and better on how to make those modifiers more effective for the individual. And then the last part of that is, if Jason comes in to see the doctor can say, based on your genetic profile and everything else, you have similarities to other 50 people that have taken this protocol. So now I'm starting with a baseline that has a little bit of efficacy experience from the past.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Wow, I really that's wow, there's so much there's so much to talk about in there. I guess one of the main things that I wanted to ask is genomics a crowded space because you mentioned earlier 23andMe went bankrupt, right? Or they're closed now. I don't see
Right.
many platforms for doctors that are decision based like this. Is there a reason specifically for that?
Well, so there's two reasons why I think the genomic space is hindered a little bit. Like at 23andMe, we can talk about. I had this conversation with 23andMe. I said, if you're
Okay.
giving somebody genetic information, the question that is being asked is now, so what? So what? I have a genetic predisposition to something. What do I do about that? And that was
Mm-hmm.
the missing part. It's the action plan that comes from that. That's first. The second thing is from a practitioner standpoint, and some of them will tell you, most of them won't tell you. They don't really understand genomics and genetics. So our platform has an AI agent that is trained for the practice where you can ask the genome a question. So you can actually interrogate the genome, chat with your DNA. So the doctor doesn't have to tell you that they don't understand what it means or which ones are likely impactful that they have to add into the treatment plan. They can just ask bios a question. Hey, show me how Jason metabolizes. Show me last time what is their aromatization level or anything of that. And it comes back with that kind of information in 8th grade language. So now they can understand freely. They can have a transparent conversation. But I think it's time, complexity, lack of understanding, and maybe it's lack of desire to learn something new because their practice is on autopilot. They're already doing this. But if you can add this as something into your practice, it creates a business opportunity as well. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So you did your hormone health test, and now we have the genome. The doctor has that as well. And now they want to do a skin genetic test or a nutrigenomic test or a cognitive
Okay.
test. Now
Okay.
they don't have to swab again. They just press a button and they can actually provide that information to their patient as well. It creates additional revenue for the practice, but it also gives the patient a lot more information about themselves and other, protocols that the doctor can prescribe.
Wow, that's crazy. That's so amazing. Now, what is the biggest goal for the business in 2026 this year?
So the biggest goal is to launch the brand new platform, which is Bio's Brain, and get a couple of our other patents finalized and make this, going whole genome, make this a standard of practice and care for practitioners. So our goal is scale. Right now, we're doing a couple clinical trials. So we have a clinical trial on Alzheimer's that we're
Okay.
doing. We have another one at Harvard on stress and anxiety. We're starting one on female hormone health and menopause. So
All right.
the goal is to be able to scale the platform, get a lot more doctors on it, and hopefully make it the standard of care.
Do you have a specific goal? Obviously, we need to have specifics in order to achieve said goal. So,
Yeah.
what types of numbers are we talking about? 100 doctors by the end of the year, 1,000 doctors by the end of the year?
Yeah, we'll have 500 doctors by the end of the year using the platform. We
Okay,
have about
that's a good goal.
187. Yeah, we have about 187 right now.
Okay.
So we'll be able to scale that fairly well. And now, look, we haven't done a really good job on marketing. That's one of the things that we're gonna,
Okay.
we have a
Yeah.
we're in
That was actually going to be my next question. Where is
yeah.
the where we focus actually on the strain and the chaos that's showing up? So if you I didn't even have to draw it out of you. So it sounds like you're having problems with marketing, but it's marketing on the B2B level, right? on
Yeah.
the side to the doctors, right? So the doctors, it sounds like you've got the challenge of also education on the doctor side because they really don't know a lot about interpreting genomics results, right?
Right. I wouldn't say it's an issue of marketing. I think it's a lack of marketing.
A lack
Uh,
of.
yeah. So one of the things is we're in the midpoint of our Series B right now.
Okay.
So I think that we invested a tremendous amount of our resources into building a platform and getting our tech right and getting all that right, which we've done a really good job at. Where we
Yeah.
didn't focus our resources is to do our go to market point to implement our full go to market strategy, and
Yeah.
so those funds are going to be allocated to that, and that's where we're going to utilize that to get more doctors on the platform.
Okay, great. That sounds really good. So, yeah, I mean, we're getting pretty close to time over here. What I wanted to ask, there's so many more questions that I wanted to ask really quick before we ran out of time. Let's say beyond the test itself, what is one part of the journey that you feel is most vulnerable to human error, inconsistency right now? Is it misinterpretation of the results? And second part of that question, how do you measure the lifetime value of that customer, and what's the most surprising factor that you found that contributes to long-term loyalty?
Yeah, I think it's several different questions. So you may have to repeat one of the or two of them. The first one
Sure.
was about what is the biggest challenge of humans getting it wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's more or less not the interpretation of it because we use AI to help them. It's understanding what protocol to prescribe and to recommend for what patient. And I was at a meeting with a bunch of healthcare practitioners,
Okay.
and there's so much new stuff that's out there they don't know. And going to continual education courses doesn't really prepare them for that. So, how do I use peptides for these conditions? What about stem cells? What about
Mm,
exosomes? So, training the model that allows them to look at regenerative health and wellness, things that are grounded already in science, I think that's going to help. So, the biggest gap that I see is have all this information. I'm not sure what tools I can use as a doctor to be able to prescribe and recommend to my patient. So training them on those options, I think that's bridging the gap.
yeah. That's a great answer, especially since a lot of doctors, like even other GLP-3 peptides, right? I'm glad you brought up peptides. They just don't know how they're so new. They really don't know how they affect the body fully, right? Let's take BPC 157, for example, the Wolverine, as they like to call it. It's extremely helpful. I see it written as a script all the time. The long-term effects, nobody really knows, right? That the doctor has to, if he's confident writing that prescription, he knows exactly how it's going to affect that patient, right? So, but I don't think a lot of people do know. The ones that do know, great, share your knowledge with the other practitioners.
Right. Yeah, it's exactly that. It's grounding the model on science and new stuff that's coming out in the market, and being able to look at possible adverse events and then mitigate those adverse events. So that's probably the biggest thing. Forgot your other question.
Yeah, no problem. The follow-up was, how do you measure the lifetime value of a customer, and what have you found personally is the most surprising factor that contributes to long-term loyalty?
Yeah, it's a great question because one of the things that doctors are starting to tell us is it creates a product flywheel for doctors. And what I
Okay.
mean by that is once people know their personalized products, like this is what I need to take, they come back and they take the products over and over and over as the platform is learning and showing that it's working for them. Now doctors not don't just have to prescribe their hormone optimization, but they have their supplement stack and they have all these different things and they know that it's working for the patient. The patient sees that it's working for them because their actual data that's supporting that now creates a flywheel that they're purchasing products over and over. So lifetime
Yeah.
value of a customer or a patient, I don't have the exact numbers on that, but I can tell you that there's a couple different ways that the practitioner makes money. So, number one, there's margin on the actual test. Number two, there's an upgrade path. So, now that we swab them and you did your one test, you can upgrade them to other tests. Number three, it's the ability to recommend and sell other products. So, supplements, nutrients, minerals, and other things that are outside of just the pharmaceuticals that generate additional revenue. And the most intangible thing that you can measure is patient satisfaction. So, who doesn't want to be treated as an individual? This model of sick care, and if you remember, I said, the doctor said to me, what can we do to get ahead of this? And that's the whole point of healthcare. Let's look to see what we can do to prevent some of these conditions from actually expressing themselves. So, if we can use preventative healthcare to mitigate and minimize the expression of disease, that's the biggest value that you can possibly provide both to the doctor and the patient.
Okay, right. Great answer. Thank you so much. Now, you mentioned me earlier that the goal was obviously to get, you said, I think 184 and to scale up to about 500 doctors towards the end of the year. If you looked at the business today, what is the single heaviest anchor that's dragging that progress down?
Uh, I mean, just like I said, it's lack of marketing and
Yeah.
getting ourselves implementing our go-to-market plan.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe as a leader or a company, I want to make sure that the platform is excellent. It's great. Our patents are in place. It works. It works really well, which it does. And instead of selling something that is that 80/20 rule where it's, we'll patch it later, I want it to be great. And that's
Yeah.
where we are right now.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good answer. Right. Yeah, thank you so much. And that's a fantastic breakdown, Len. And thank you so much for being so candid about the operational reality. I really do appreciate it. We've covered a lot of ground today, from your origin story to the future of this unique and very breakthrough test. And I know that our audience is going to get immense value from this. Make sure to check the link in the description. It's EndoDNA. You'll see it right down here below. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the recorded portion of the Growth Lab.